Most people think retirement freedom begins at 65, but for millions of Americans, the real turning point happens years earlier, quietly, almost invisibly. At age 62, the strange thing is, most people reach that age without realizing how much power it gives them. They keep waking up before sunrise, driving through traffic, sitting in meetings they stopped caring about years ago, all because they believe they still have no choice. But once you understand what actually changes at 62, many of you will realize you may already be much closer to work optional than you think. If you are somewhere between 58 and 60 for and still, assuming you must grind until full retirement age, this video may completely change the way you think about your future. There is a moment that hits a lot of people. Around 61 or 62, it usually happens late at night. The house is quiet. Maybe the kids are grown. Maybe the mortgage is smaller than it used to be. You open your retirement accounts, check your balances, and suddenly the question in your mind changes. For decades the question was, can I survive retirement? But now the question becomes something deeper. How much longer do I want to trade my healthiest years for stress I no longer need? That is the moment this video is about. You see, age 62 is not just another birthday. It is the first age when Social Security retirement benefits become available for most Americans. It is also the age where many workers begin seriously considering whether full-time work still makes sense. But what most people never learn is that 62 is not really about claiming Social Security early. It is about gaining options, and options create freedom. Once you understand how income, taxes, healthcare, and retirement accounts begin working together after 62, you stop seeing retirement as a cliff and start seeing it as a gradual transition you can design around your life. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is that retirement income must replace every dollar of their old salary. That is simply not true for many households. Think about it. While working, a huge portion of your paycheck disappears before you even enjoy it. Taxes, retirement contributions, commuting costs, work clothes, lunches out, payroll deductions, maybe helping adult children, maybe stress spending after exhausting weeks. But once full-time work slows down, many of those expenses shrink naturally. The shocking thing many retirees discover is that they often need far less monthly income than they imagined. Here is where age 60 becomes powerful. At that point, many people suddenly have multiple income levers they can pull from. Instead of relying on one rigid paycheck, maybe you have some savings. Maybe a spouse still works part-time. Maybe you can claim a smaller Social Security benefit while allowing investment accounts to grow. Maybe you withdraw strategically from retirement accounts in lower tax years. The key difference is this. While working, your paycheck controls your lifestyle. After 62, if planned correctly, your lifestyle can start controlling your income strategy instead. Now let's talk about the emotional side nobody discusses enough. There is a hidden exhaustion that builds up in your late 50s and early 60s. Not always physical exhaustion. Sometimes it is emotional fatigue. You realize you have spent decades being responsible for everyone else, the company, the clients, the deadlines, the bills, the family, and suddenly you begin asking yourself a dangerous question. What if I don't want to spend the next 8 years doing this exact same thing? That question scares people because they assume stepping away from full-time work means financial danger. But often, the real danger is never stopping long enough to enjoy the years your health still allows. Many retirees later admit something heartbreaking. They waited too long. They assumed more money would automatically create more security. But when they finally retired in their late 60s or 70s, they discovered their energy had changed. The trips became harder. The knees hurt more. The long hikes disappeared. Friends developed health problems. Parents needed care. Suddenly the freedom they worked so hard for arrived at the exact moment their bodies were less able to enjoy it. That is why understanding the 62 window matters so much. It is not just a financial decision. It is a life decision. Now before someone says, "But Uncle John, what about Social Security penalties?" Let's clear something up. Yes, claiming Social Security at 62 permanently reduces your monthly benefit compared to waiting until full retirement age or age 70. But retirement planning is not about maximizing one number in isolation. It is about maximizing your overall quality of life, flexibility, and long-term stability. Sometimes delaying benefits makes perfect sense. Sometimes taking benefits earlier while reducing stress and preserving investments can also make sense. The right answer depends on health, savings, taxes, family history, and lifestyle goals. That is why retirement is personal math, not internet math. Here is another mistake people make. They assume retirement means never earning another dollar again. That old model is disappearing. More and more people are creating hybrid retirements. They leave stressful, full-time careers but still earn part-time income doing work they actually enjoy, consulting, teaching, seasonal work, freelance projects, small businesses, remote work. The beauty of this approach is psychological as much as financial. Instead of feeling like you are quitting life, you feel like you are redesigning it, and honestly, that redesign can dramatically reduce the pressure on your investments. Imagine someone earning $90,000 a year from a stressful full-time job. They may assume they need to fully replace all $90,000 in retirement. But what if their actual spending after taxes and retirement contributions is only $55,000? What if part-time work covers $20,000 of that? Suddenly the amount needed from savings becomes much smaller than expected. This is the moment many people realize they are not trapped. They were just using the wrong assumptions. Now let's talk taxes, because this is where many people accidentally lose thousands without realizing it. Most workers spend decades focused on growing retirement accounts but almost no time learning how withdrawals are taxed later. After 62, especially if work income drops, many households enter lower tax years temporarily, and those years can become golden opportunities for strategic planning. Some people use those years to slowly move money from traditional IRAs into Roth accounts before required minimum distributions begin later in life. Others intentionally withdraw moderate amounts while staying inside manageable tax brackets. The goal is not avoiding taxes forever. The goal is controlling when and how those taxes hit. This matters because large, required withdrawals later in your 70s can create a chain reaction. Higher taxable income can increase Medicare premiums. It can push more Social Security into taxation. It can reduce financial flexibility exactly when you want life to become simpler. Many people unknowingly create giant future tax problems by delaying all withdrawals while continuing high income work deep into their 60s. The irony is painful. They work longer to feel safer but sometimes create larger future tax headaches in the process. Healthcare is another fear that keeps people frozen. And yes, healthcare before Medicare eligibility can be expensive, but fear becomes manageable when you replace guesses with actual numbers. Many couples discover that once work income falls, they may qualify for healthcare subsidies that dramatically reduce costs. Others realize COBRA coverage or part-time jobs with benefits can bridge the gap temporarily. The point is not that healthcare is cheap. The point is that uncertainty often feels scarier than reality. Once people run the numbers carefully, many discover the gap is not nearly as impossible as they imagine. Another thing people rarely discuss is how retirement changes your relationship with time itself. When you are working full-time, your calendar belongs to someone else. Mondays feel heavy. Wednesdays disappear in routine. Fridays become recovery days instead of joyful days. But once you regain control over your schedule, even partially, life begins to slow down in a beautiful way. Morning coffee lasts longer. You notice seasons changing. You exercise more. Stress levels drop. Relationships improve. You finally have time to think instead of constantly reacting. That is why the smartest retirees do not focus only on investment returns. They focus on designing meaningful days. Because retirement without purpose becomes boredom very quickly. The happiest retirees are usually not the ones with the biggest accounts. They are the ones with structure, hobbies, relationships, movement, and goals outside of work. Some volunteer, some travel, some babysit grandkids, some build businesses they actually enjoy. Some simply enjoy the luxury of waking up without an alarm clock for the first time in 40 years. Here is something important most financial commercials never tell you. The transition into retirement is rarely perfect. There will be uncertainty. Markets will fluctuate. Some years will feel easier than others, but waiting for absolute certainty often becomes an endless trap. At some point, retirement planning stops being purely mathematical and becomes emotional. You must decide whether another 3 or 4 years of stress is truly worth what those years cost you, physically and mentally. I once heard a retiree explain it perfectly. He said, "I spent 30 years trying to build enough money to buy freedom, then almost forgot to use the freedom once I could afford it." That sentence sticks with people because deep down many workers understand exactly what he means. So how do you know whether you are closer than you think? Start simple. First, calculate your real spending, not your guess spending. Most people are shocked when they finally separate essential expenses from optional lifestyle spending. Second, look at all income sources together instead of individually. Savings, investments, Social Security, part-time work, pensions, home equity. Third, understand your tax picture. The difference between poor withdrawal planning and smart withdrawal planning over 20 years can be enormous. And finally, ask yourself a question most people avoid. If money were no longer the main factor, how would I actually want to spend my time? because that question changes everything. Many people discover they do not truly hate work. They hate work without flexibility. They hate exhaustion without purpose. They hate sacrificing health for meetings that no longer matter. Once they realize they can reduce hours, consult, switch careers, or semi-retire instead of choosing between all-or-nothing extremes, the future suddenly feels lighter. And perhaps that is the real lesson of age 62. It is not an ending. It is leverage. It is the moment when decades of saving finally begin giving you choices. Choices about your mornings. Choices about stress. Choices about family. Choices about health. Choices about time itself. If you are somewhere between your late 50s and early 60s, tonight I want you to ask yourself one simple question. If I could redesign my life around freedom instead of fear, what would my next 10 years actually look like? Not your co-worker's life. Not your neighbor's life. Your life. Because once you understand how retirement income really works after 62, you may realize something powerful. You do not necessarily need more years. You may simply need a better plan. And for many people, that realization becomes the first, truly peaceful night of sleep they have had in decades.